Good afternoon and welcome to another Micrographics webinar. My name is Carl van Rooyen and today we'll be looking at Vault Professional items and bill of materials, also referred to as BOM. This session is going out live on YouTube but will also be recorded, and you can take advantage of the live chat panel on YouTube to send through any questions should you have any throughout the course of the presentation. And we will also have a Q&A session at the end. So if I don't get to answering your questions immediately, we can cover them towards the end. And this recording will become available on our YouTube channel afterwards as well. So as I said, my name is Carl van Rooyen. I'm an application engineer with Micrographics, and today we'll be looking at Vault Professional, specifically items and the bill of materials related to or linked to items. So we'll have a look at our agenda. We will start with an introduction to items and why you want to use items and their related bill of materials. We will then move on to how you would create an item and the various ways in which this can be done. From there, we will look at viewing the item bill of materials, what we can do once we are viewing the bill of materials. We'll also be looking at how items are created from scratch, so either using CAD data or creating a blank item and adding information to that. We'll also look at how to compare bill of materials between different revisions of an item. We'll also look at exporting out the bill of materials for later use downstream in the manufacturing and sort of admin process of dealing with the bill of materials information. And we'll close off then with a summary and Q&A. So to start off our intro, we'll ask a question, what is an item? A lot of people may use Inventor, may use Vault. You might be using Vault Basic or Vault Pro without items. And so typically you'd be working in Vault just with your design data, your CAD information. Let's say it's your Inventor parts, assemblies, drawings, or AutoCAD DWG files. When you work with Vault Professional, you have the ability to create items. So what is that item? And I like to think of an item as a capsule. And this capsule can basically house all of the related information, all information that you want linked together. And that capsule can keep all of that information stored together. Almost like a box. You want to take a box, you're going to put a part into that box, you might put multiple parts into that box. You might want to put some documentation and some other information into that box and store it in that box. And if you grab that box or that capsule, everything is linked to that. So a capsule or an item inside of Vault can store multiple or have multiple linked items within it or files within it. And so if we look at the item here, this item would have or shows us it has a part linked to the item. The drawing for that part is also linked to the item. If you're using CAD files, this would typically be the minimum that is inside of your item. And then over and above that, the user can manually add any other documentation or any other information that they feel needs to be linked to that item or those part or that part and drawing. So the information linked to the item there we see is the design or the CAD file as well as its drawing, but we also have non-design files like PDFs and Office documents. If we move on to an item that was created with an assembly linked to that item, we would see that we would have the assembly file, and if there was a drawing for that assembly file, that drawing as well would be related or linked to that item. Then If there were any other files that had to be added to that item, they could also be added. Once again, those non-design files. But because this assembly may have other parts within it, parts and sub-assemblies, those files could also be converted to items. And so the last row there, I've got 3 little capsules, 3 items there. Those would represent the bill of materials. Those would represent the other items related to that assembly. That assembly may be made up of 3 parts, part A, B, and C. And each of those parts would be converted to an item or assigned to an item. And we see those 3 items at the bottom there, 1 for each part. So we have an item for a single part with its drawing. We then have an item for an assembly with its drawing, and then the bill of materials represented by those 3 capsules at the bottom. Then lastly, you may have an item where the item has no CAD file linked to it at all. And this may just be something like grease. It could be an item that you don't design in your CAD system. You actually don't model it up in Inventor, but you need it for the assembly, or you need it for your end product. So it could be paint, it could be grease, it could be cable ties. Any item that you do not need to actually model up in Inventor, you could create an item for that and still have it included in the bill of materials at the end of the day. You'll see this item here, the third one, I've got, displaying, we could have PDF and Office documents, but other items can also be loaded inside of that item to create a bill of materials. That could also be, looking at it at a very high level, you could have a salesperson who creates an item that represents a RFQ, quote, and they can then start dragging other items into that to generate a bill of materials for that quote without even needing the designer to do any design work. And that would typically work nicely for off-the-shelf products. Just to expand on the thought of, why would you want to use items? We can look at taking a single part, converting it to an item, and that item groups information together. So, repeating basically the previous slide here, but just showing here that you can look for that part. If I step this back, you could go into Vault, you could find the part, you can find its related item. So you can actually do a search for, let's say, that part number, find the item, and then open up that item and view all the information related to that item. So you would have the part, you would have the drawing, and you would have any other documentation relating to that item available in there. Could be things like work process or process documentation, work instructions, quality control checks, any documentation like that could be added to the item. It could be an animation showing how the, if it was an assembly, how the assembly was put together. And so that allows you to group that data and easily access that data. But on the other side of enabling items and using items is that you can have greater control over life cycles and revisions through the use of change orders, ECOs, engineering change orders. And we see here that the item can have a life cycle, let's say work in progress at the top there of that flowchart. And the item can be moved through those life cycles, work in progress to waiting approval. If it's in waiting approval, let's say the design office cannot modify the item, but they have not yet released that for manufacturing. Once it goes through to the released process, the item can be released for manufacturing. The fabrication or the factory floor would be able to view that item and its related files. And through an ECO, that released item could be changed back to work in progress. And that's typically where a revision would be bumped for that item. So it might go from revision 0 to revision 1. And as the cycle continues, the revisions of your items will bump up. And this could be a change to the part that causes a revision bump. It could be a change to a process that causes the item to bump in a revision. So there's a different process that needs to be adhered to. So a little bit of document control can be built into this as well. Moving on from this, we get greater bill of materials or BOM control. We're able to, from within the item, switch on or off bill of material rows. We could say that, you know what, we don't need a specific part in the bill of materials for, let's say, the customer that we are producing for at the moment. We could switch rows that were potentially switched off back on. Could be things like packaging material, shipping crates. You can also then use the option to add extra bill of material rows. So we could take the bill of materials as it would be in Inventor with all the CAD designs, but add packaging, add those other items that are not drawn in Inventor. We also get the ability to do a bill of materials comparison. We can take the current revision of the file and we can compare it to a previous revision. We'll go a little bit more in depth into this later on in the presentation. And finally, it also allows for ERP integration. This would allow you to either have software and add-in created or plugin created that can directly interface between Vault Pro's API and your ERP system, or as I'll show in today's webinar, you would be able to export information from the items in Vault into a format, let's say a CSV format, which can be manipulated and imported into your ERP system. Okay, so I'm going to jump into a live demo here to go through just the basic introduction of the items, and we'll have a look inside of Vault where you would find items and how you would essentially navigate around Vault Professional to view items and view the information linked to those items. And then we'll go in and have a deeper dive into how these items are actually created and then manipulated. So I'm going to go into Vault Professional, and inside of Vault Professional, down the left-hand side at the bottom, we've got our basically our workspaces that we can choose. And if we are in the Project Explorer workspace, we would be browsing our files that are within Vault. And so we can see here inside of Vault, I have a couple of files that are not design data, they're not Inventor files. We can see here we've got a 3MF file, a G-code file, and a PDF. And these we'll see later on. We'll use these to add them to items. But if I have a look at this item over here, or this file over here, a PDF, on the far right hand side in Vault, we have this column that says link to item, and there's a little icon in there. And that shows me that this PDF is linked to an item. So I'm just going to go in holding Control and clicking to go to that item. Vault will then shift over to essentially the item master workspace, which is basically your list of all your items that are within Vault, and it has selected that item. As you can inside of Vault Pro, you can preview all the information related to that item in the preview pane at the bottom. So I'd be able to go to General and view the general information with regards to this item. So here I'm seeing that the item is, the description here says white lithium grease for gears, and it's measured in grams. And it's a purchased part. It falls under the purchased category. So we can see general information with regards to that item, and we can see the file that is linked to that item. That is that file that we saw when I was in the Project Explorer viewing the files inside of Vault. If I go here to Bill of Materials, we see that there is just the single line item, the WLG 001. There's no sub components or sub items to this. We'd expect to see that with something like grease. And we can see if this is used anywhere using the standard where used option in Vault, and I can see it's not used anywhere yet. And is it related to any change orders? Can we view it and view the information in that PDF? Let's see it. So we've got PDF will load up and we can view that information in that PDF. And we could have multiple files attached to this, not just the single PDF. We could have more files attached here. So that would be a simple item with just a document within it. If I go to any of these other items here inside of Vault, in this list that we've got at the top, I'm just going to grab the one just above here. We can see that this item that I chose is a part file, which is linked to a part. So the associated file is a part. There is no drawing associated to this, but I have one here where I can click on, I've got a shortcut here to a part where I have a drawing as well. So we see here is the part and its drawing. And if I go to its item, I can hold Control and click there. That now takes me to that item. The item number here is linked to the part number. And we see here we have the file as well as the drawing. Now, those keen-eyed of you would see that there are two other files with similar names. We've got two with the MSA at the end and one without MSA. These three files all have the same part number. Hence, they have all been linked to this one item. So essentially, the way my Vault is set up, if the part number matches, the file is linked to the item with that number. And so in this case, we have one drawing, but three parts, three separate parts within Vault that are linked back to that item. So that would be just a single part file. If I go to an assembly, you would see that the assembly shows the associated assembly file. This has no drawing associated to it, but if we go to the bill of materials, we would be able to view the bill of materials for this assembly. And this is showing all the related items. So these are items that are shown in the bill of materials, not the files like you would see inside of Inventor. At the moment for this, the structure is pretty much the same as it would show in Inventor, but we could modify this and change this as needed. So you can either browse to your items through Project Explorer from the actual files that you are viewing. As we saw here, we could grab, we could pick an item or a file in that list, and we can hold Control and click on the item icon. That would take you to the item. Otherwise, you could right-click on the file and say Go to Item, and that would also take you to the item. Alternatively, you can go into Item Master, into the Item Master workspace, and you can search Item Master for a specific file. So you'd be able to type in a search term and find that item related to that. Let's say it's a part number. You'd be able to find that item. So just heading back to the presentation. We will now look at how do we create an item. And there are a couple of ways in which this can be done. It can be done directly from the CAD file. So once you've checked your files into Vault, you can then essentially go through a process where you right-click on the CAD file and you can say assign or update item. And that would essentially take that CAD file that you've checked in. In this case, I've got the part option here, and you generate the item. Once you've assigned an item to that part file, that item will look at retrieving any information that is related or linked to that part. So typically it will look, does that part have a drawing? And if it does, it will link the part and the drawing as an associated file to the item. From there, you can then add any other files that you wish to the item. So you can see at the bottom, once again, I've just got the PDF and the Office documents. It doesn't have to be that. It could be a step file, a ArgIS, STL, any other file format for a CAD document. It could even be a movie or a short video clip attached to that item. And so that would be grabbing a file, whether it's a part or even a document, to create the item. Alternatively, you can create an item from scratch, where you would start the process of creating an item. You would give that item a number, and you would then associate files or other items to that item. Once the item is created, it is stored in the item master. You'll be able to search for the item number, find it, and then view the item and all the information within that item. There are also drag and drop methods where you can essentially grab a file and drag and drop that file either into the item master tab or into the item master node on the left-hand side of Vault. And so it's kind of 3 different ways in which you can create an item from an existing file. So moving on from this, if we had to look at a large assembly, you may think, oh, this is going to take quite a bit of time to create an item for every single file or every single part in this assembly. But in actual fact, Vault can be set up to automatically generate items for the child components. So for an assembly like this that could potentially comprise of a couple of hundred to a couple of thousand parts, it's really a simple sort of 2 or 3 click process. Basically, you would right click on the actual assembly file itself. So if I go forward a slide here, we can see in the right click menu for that assembly file, we've got the option to assign or update item. Now, if the item does not already exist, it will assign this assembly to that item. If the item already exists, it will update the existing item with any information that may have changed in that assembly. Once that is done, it will take you to the item screen itself, basically the item editor, and you would be able to then put in information regarding the actual item itself. So we see here we'll be able to modify the properties as needed. So it's basically a 2-click process to get into this editor, and once you're in the editor, you're able to view and adjust the information such as the title, the description, the units. And if you want to add any other associated files, you can do that. It might be assembly instructions for something like this. It might be a spec sheet or a work instruction on how to operate this machine. There are other tabs available here within the item editor as well. You can view the history to view any historical data related to this item. How many versions or revisions of this item have there been. In this case, it would be empty because it's a new item. You can view the bill of materials, which would allow you to see all the other items that will be created. We'll have a look at that in the demo. We'll be able to see a list of all the other items, so all the child components that will be converted or assigned to items. And then we have the where used change order tab to see if there are any change orders. Obviously, those would be empty, or the change order would be empty in the case of a new item. And then view would allow you to preview the related files. So you've got those options. You'd be able to view through them. Mostly you'd be editing for new items. You'd be editing the general tab and potentially making changes on the bill of materials tab. Now, if I skip ahead to the next slide, we'll be looking at creating an item from scratch. And why would you want to create an item from scratch? And this would typically be something that is a user-defined item that doesn't include CAD designs. So typically something like grease or adhesives or mechanical components that are not actually physically modeled, like cable ties. So the idea here would be that you would go with Item Master active, you would go and use the new item shortcut at the top of the screen. Alternatively, you can right-click on Item Master and choose New Item, and that would bring up the item editing dialog box. Third option here would be, while you're editing an item, from inside of its bill of materials, you can then create a new item or add an item to that bill of materials, but create it from scratch as you add it. So you may have a bill of materials, or you may have an item that represents a machine, and typically from historical data you use 200 cable ties in that machine. And so for its bill of materials, you can either add from an existing item, or you can add from a new item and then actually input the information for the cable ties to create that item. Once again, I'll go through this within the demo. We can see how this actually works live inside of Vault. And we will then continue on from that. So we create the items. Once items are created, we then have the ability to view the bill of materials. So as I mentioned, while creating the item, you can go to bill of materials. At any time, you can also edit an item and view its bill of materials. So on the right-hand side here, we've got the image showing the bill of materials tab for an assembly. You can see it's the assembly's packaging machine, and the bill of materials breaks down the structure of the machine. So we can see some options across the top. We are viewing the latest work in progress bill of materials, or version of this item, should I say, and we're viewing it under a multi-level display with all rows turned on. So we're displaying all rows, whether they're on or off. And we can see essentially the structure of the bill of materials. So we can see our top level assembly, we can see first level sub-assemblies, and then second level sub-assemblies, parts, and so on. So it breaks down. And the bill of materials tracks this as well with the row order. So we got that number there, 1, 1.1, 1.2, and so on. If we had to expand the ADSK 018140, that's at row order 1.1, any of its parts would be 1.1.1, 1.1.2, and so on. We get that position number, which also shows us essentially the position it is within the assembly, and you'll see that somewhat ties in with the row order as well. We've got 1.1 is row position number 1, 1.2 is row position or position number 2, and so on. We go down the list. This grid display by default is basically showing quantity, the actual title of the item, revisions, but this is customizable. You can choose what properties get displayed within this grid. Now, over and above being able to view the bill of materials, if this is an item that has been created, it's been changed, it's gone through a couple of life cycles and a couple of revisions where information within this item has changed over a couple of weeks, months, or years, you would want to potentially be able to track those changes or view those changes. You may be on a new revision, or you may be producing the latest revision, but a customer from 5 years ago wants a spare part or wants a replacement to match what they had purchased 5 years ago. You're able to view and compare the bill of materials of the latest revision, or even an earlier revision to that revision that may have been supplied 5 years ago to the customer. And so that's where we get to our BoM Compare. Now the BoM Compare, as I mentioned, would allow you to compare a specific revision, or compare the current revision to a specific previous revision. And this would be done at the top of the bill of materials or the item window, where you would select the revision that you want to compare to. So we can see here in the image on the right hand side, we're comparing to revision B-3, work in progress. And this tracks and displays or visualizes changes that can happen, or that have happened throughout the process of the design. And so we can see here, we can track those property changes, and looking at item, what's that, 500, 381, there have been parts that have been removed. So we can see that there are a couple of line items that are red and have been struck out. So those have been removed and they have been replaced. So in this case, a couple of revision A files were removed, and then they were replaced with revision C files. And there's actually a file there that ends in 67, the third line item, that was removed completely from that assembly. And FT-001 was added. So that's a complete addition, a new addition to that item. And so we can see over the time, as the files have been revised, it's marked what has been removed and what has been added to that item. So the BoM comparison allows you to see how things have changed throughout the process. Then, last slide before we go into a live demo in the software and go through this in the actual software, we can look at the bill of materials export. And so the bill of materials export from Item Master allows you to integrate with your ERP system. So once a design is released and you need to provide information downstream to purchasing, they need to supply that information to suppliers, you're able to extract that from Vault and give it to your purchasing department in a format that they could import into potentially import into the ERP system. And this is a process, a couple of steps in the process. I'll just do a high-level highlight of it here. Basically, you would open the item and you would go to the Actions menu to choose to export the items. From there, you would choose which items in the bill of materials you want to export. You would select your format. Is it CSV? Is it comment delimited, tab delimited? Is it an XML file? You would select your attributes or your properties that you want to export, essentially your item number, your item title, description, quantity, units, revision, that sort of information. And finally, you would export that to an external file that you can then send to whoever needs that file to integrate into ERP. So just a high-level look there. We are going to go into a demo before our closing with the summary. So I'm going to go back once again to Vault to do the demo. And what we're going to look at here is essentially the process of creating an item from let's say a single file, all the way through to creating items from a big assembly or for a big assembly, and adding items to that big assembly, either from an existing item or creating an item from scratch. And then we will look at the bill of materials comparison across items. So starting off with creating, let's say, items from an assembly. This would typically be the workflow within a design department. You have created your let's say your design, you're finished with the assembly process, you're finished with the detailing, and now those files are all in Vault, and you want to start generating items to take it to that next step, take it to the next level of adding more information in that's not necessarily tied to the CAD. And so you would browse to your file within Vault. So I'm going to go in here. I've got a data set here. And if I have a look at this packaging machine here, and I look at its, it is related or it is linked. Just go down. Sorry, wrong folder. So I'm going to go here. I've got a copy of that packaging machine, so it helps if I'm in the correct folder. And if I look at this packaging machine, there is no item currently linked to that packaging machine, not assigned to an item. So we'd be able to use either the right-click option to assign/update item, or alternatively drag and drop that assembly onto the item node. So if we're on the home option here, we can drag and drop that into item master, and you'll see there it says create items. I'm going to go ahead with my favorite option. I prefer to use the right click assign update. I find that just a little bit quicker than trying to find where the item master node is. And this will go and it'll fetch all the information with regards to that assembly. So it'll go and it'll find all the child components, and it will create the item. So here we see the item editor essentially. We have the title for the item. We have the description. We have the units and also the number, which was auto. Basically, this was is mapped. The way it's set up in my Vault is it's mapped to the part number for that file. Now we can see that this has actually found an existing item for the original assembly. So we actually have both of them linked in here. So what I'm going to go ahead and do here is I'm going to change the number, and essentially that's going to change the item number for this file. And let me bring that window back on here. I'm going to say that it's mapped, and under mapped here I am going to type in a name. Now this typically wouldn't be the case because the part number, well, in this case here, the part number was not changed during the copy design process. So I'm having to go ahead and update this manually. And so MGFX packaging machine, I'll hit OK there. Okay, and the item number is updated. What I'm going to do here is remove that file. And so we've got the packaging machine with the item in there. And we can go and we can view the bill of materials for this. Now, in the bill of materials tab, we would be able to view all the items that are linked to that assembly, or essentially all the items that are created with that assembly. Sorry, let me go back there. And so all of these items for this assembly have been created in the background, and when you hit save, they will all be saved into your item master. And so you would select the save option, and that would save your items. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Save the items. It'll generate all of the other items related to this assembly, and it would then populate the item master with all that information. We can then go to the bill of materials and view all of that information in the bill of materials. We can view, should I say, the files in that bill of materials. So that would be for an assembly. There could be quite a long list of files in that assembly, but all of those items are generated automatically when you create the item for the main assembly. So any child components have the items updated. Just to go back to a single component, if I go to my folder, let's say to go back to let's say a file or just a single part file, the process would be the same. We can right click on a file. So I've got a 3MF file here. This was used for 3D printing. You can right click on that file and assign update an item, and the item will be created much in the same way as with an actual CAD file, part or an assembly. And so we'll see here a item number was automatically generated. I don't have schemes set up, so the number is just a auto generated number, but I can quite easily go to actions and change that number. So I'm going to change it from sequential to mapped, and at this point here I'm just going to put in just a let's say 3D P for 3D print -001, just some random part number for that. And so the item number there, I could have matched that to the actual name of the file. But the 3MF file here would also be, we would also want to link that 3MF file to the resulting G code that's output from, in this case, Cura. And so we can also add that associated file. So we can either add a link or an attachment. I'm going to go ahead and add a link back to that file, so it keeps a live link with that file. And I've got to go and drag this back through, and we'll go into that folder and grab the G code file as well. And so I'll open that up. And now we have those two files attached to this item. And so you can create an item from standard CAD files, or you can create an item from any other file format. Saving this item will then generate that item and put it into item master. And we will see that if we close this off, these files are linked to that item. So I can hold Control and click on the icon to take me to that item. And we can then view all that information. So quite easily could search for that part number and get a result for the actual 3MF file and the G code linked to that specific part number. Then the last thing to look at here with editing, or basically with editing and creating items, we'll look at basically editing the item that I've just created and adding another item in as part of its bill of materials. And so basically you'll right click on the item, choose open, and then you can click on edit to edit that item. This is now assuming that the state of this item is in a work in progress state, or there is no state assigned to the item. By default, this item actually was created because it was a document style file. The category was assigned as document. That was automatically done through Vault's category rules. So we can see the category as document, but we can still go to bill of materials here, and we can use the option to either add from existing items, or we can add from a new item. And so what I'll do here is I'll do one of both. I'm going to go from existing item, and that would allow you to browse through or search your item master for a specific item. So in this case, I'm going to go WL1 lithium with some wildcards, and I'm looking for a specific WLG. I had an item called that was that lithium grease. If for some reason this needs some of that, we can grab that item, search for it, grab it, and then put it in. And this was measured in grams, so we can adjust the quantity. Maybe we need 2 grams of that for this specific item. So we've got 2 grams of grease. we may have 3D printed gears that we want to add some grease to for this. Then over and above that, we can go and let's say add another item, but we want to create an item from scratch. So we can go from new item. We will select the category for this item, seeing it's an item we're creating from scratch with no files associated to it. So as of yet, so I'm going to go ahead here and say this is going to be a purchased part. I'm going to hit OK, and that will open up add a row for the next item. And because it's sequential, it's added in just another number there. But I can go ahead and change number on that. I'm going to say yes to save and continue, and I can go into that item and I can make changes to that specific item. So my thought process here is this is maybe it's a filament, so I'm going to say it's PLA-O, let's say PLA-1.7, maybe it's 1.7 millimeter or 1.75 millimeter PLA, and then dash BLK for black. So I'm just putting in a part number for that. And we can go ahead and basically save this item, and if we need to edit that item, the PLA item, any further, we can right click on that and open it specifically on its own, where we can go ahead and edit that item. And I have too many items open here in edit mode, so I'm going to exit edit mode for this one. So it's read only, so I can then edit this one. So unfortunately we can't edit multiple items at the same time, but I can go ahead here and say, okay, well, the filament we're going to measure in, let's say, grams. So let me have a look. We're going to go grams of filament, and we could fill in a title and description for the filament. So let's say it's black PLA description, 1.75 millimeter black PLA. And you can fill in your information as needed for your item. I'm going to go ahead and save that item. And we'll go ahead and close off that added item. So you can go ahead and basically add items into another item, either add an existing item or create a new item and add it from scratch essentially. And we would be able to go ahead and view that bill of materials for that specific item. Just go back there, bill of materials. Just having a look here, I see that quantity doesn't stick for some reason, but I'll be able to make that change as needed. Okay, so from an item creation perspective, you're either right-clicking on files to assign to an item, or you are creating an item from scratch. We could do it even up here, new item, and assign all the information to that item, categories, files, properties, and so on. So that's the item creation. Viewing of the bill of materials, I'm going to do that by viewing the item related to our main assembly here. So I'm going to go ahead and actually open that item up. And we'll go to the bill of materials here on this one. And we can see that the bill of materials here shows us our various levels of the bill of materials with our information related to that. So we have our row order, position number, quantities, and so on. Now from here, we can choose to compare this with a specific level. So we can compare the information back to a previous version or back to a previous revision. So if I go back here to A-4 released, and I click on compare, the grid will update to show a comparison between the two, and we can see if there was any changes. Now essentially I'll right click on the top level and choose expand all, and we can scroll through and we can see here there was a change. The B there is in a different font, so we have had a change on the revision. It's different, and if we scroll through, not many changes. We're just seeing a couple of revision changes on some of the parts, and we can continue to scroll through to see visually if there are any changes to those. Now this is quite a large assembly, so I'm going to close this off and go to a much smaller assembly. I'm going to open the item for that assembly and view its bill of materials. So we'll see here, I go to bill of materials, we have 3 items, and we can compare this to its initial release. And we'll see a little bit easier here, a little bit more information with regards to that. We have 3 lines at the bottom showing that basically revision A was removed for these 3 items. But if we look at the top, the items numbers ending in 65 and 66 were added back in. You can see they removed 65 and 66. They were added back in at revision C. So we can see that information that was there, and also FT-001, that was added. That's a new item put into this bill of materials. So we can view and see the changes made in the progress of this design. So we're getting close to the end of our time. The last thing I need to show is the export of the bill of materials. I'm just going to do this very quickly with this item that I just had open. We can go to actions, and in actions we can export items. And this will open up a dialog box which lists the items related to this bill of materials. So we can see those, the main item plus its 3 children. We can choose to include or exclude any of those items. We'll click next. We choose the format. So I'm going to just go to CSV format. I want to show the BOM indication as level numbers rather than parent items. And then for the file name, we'll browse out and save this to a specific location. So to keep life easy here, I'm going to go to downloads, and for the file name here, I'll just call this test export. Hit save. You can confirm your location, click next, and then we get the mapping. Now I did this earlier. I dragged attributes from the left hand side across to the right hand side, and you can see here if I want to check the units, I'm going to drag units across to the right, and that would then include the units attribute in the export. One thing I did notice is that your level is a default option, but you have to include the number option as well. So you would drag the number from the left side to the right. Only once the number is in there, that's the actual item number, are you able to export. So you drag the attributes across to the right hand side. You can also rearrange these attributes by clicking and dragging and dropping them. And you can also save this so that you can import it for a different export that you do. Clicking export will then export that file out. You get a summary. You can review the summary, and you can print it or even email that summary off. or you can just click finished. I'm going to go ahead here to my downloads, and if I open up that test export, we would then be able to see what that export looks like. Okay, so there we have it. We have the level, so we show the item level, the item number, all of those properties that were included for the export. And that can then be used down the line by whoever works with your ERP system, whether it's purchasing, stores, those other departments that may be able to use this information down the line. Okay, so that was just recapping or just going through the process of creating items, viewing the bill of materials for the items, as well as exporting the bill of materials. So we're going to go back to the presentation, and we'll close off with our summary. So essentially, just in closing on our summary, why would you use items? Basically, to go back to the beginning, it allows you, the use of items allows you to group related information together. You can take your design files, attach them to an item, attach any process documentation to an item. It could be work instructions, it could be a process sheet, it could be even quality control information that can all be attached to an item to make it easier to find that information. An example would be searching for a part number, finding the related item, and then finding any information that is relevant to that specific part. And this essentially allows you to gain more control over your designs and over your process, as well as gaining control over the actual bill of materials. One thing I didn't mention through the process was adding things like packaging materials, pallets, wrapping, anything that would not be designed but needs to be included in the cost of actually delivering your product can be an item within Vault. And you can include those items into Vault. So you're gaining control over costs. From a quoting perspective, a salesperson could create an item and they could then populate that item with existing items from Vault that have the designs in there. And so they can pull in machine A, machine B, machine C into an item and essentially generate a bill of materials for a quote without having to touch a design. And that gaining control gives, it's giving sales a bit of a one-up. It's giving them control to be able to quickly put together information and get an idea on costing. Over and above that, from a design office perspective, you're able to revision the items using ECOs and life cycles to control the actual life cycle of the item. And at the end of the day, comparing bill of materials between older versions and current versions, or older revisions and current revisions, to see what changes have happened over the weeks, months, years of that design's life, and to be able to be prepared for any eventuality where maybe old machinery has to be replaced or a spare part has to be provided to an old customer. And lastly, data can be pushed downstream or upstream from Vault to integrate with ERP systems. That bill of materials can be exported, or the items can be exported and imported into ERP systems. So that there would really bring us to a close. We'll finish off with a Q&A session. So if there are any questions, feel free to use the chat panel to send them through, and we can go through and answer those as required. Okay, there are no questions that have come through, so I'm going to say thank you very much for your time and patience. And once again, this video will be posted up on YouTube as well for viewing at a later stage. So thank you so much for your time and patience. Once again, this webinar brought to you by Micrographics. My name is Cole van Rooyen. And for any more information with regards to this presentation or anything else, please feel free to visit our website or email us. My information was on the first page, on the first slide, and we've got our company information on the last slide here. Please, thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Like the video, subscribe to our channel, and switch on notifications so that you can get notified of our next up and coming live presentations. Thank you so much.